What is the weirdest thing you have ever walked in on? Story 1. I work in a hotel, and a guest asked for a coffee maker to be brought up as we didn't have them in every room. I knocked on the door a couple of times, as we're supposed to do, and didn't hear a response, so I cracked the door open just a bit to see an undressed man with one of those leather-looking dog masks. I just froze for what felt like 8 minutes and closed the door. I just left the coffee maker outside the room. Now, writing that last part reminded me of this, so I guess my reply is a bit of a 2-for-1 special. I walked into the employee bathroom once, which does lock, so if the handle turns, I assume it's free and clear, and walked in on a coworker completely undressed, sitting on the toilet with all their clothes strewn about the bathroom floor. He and I haven't made eye contact in about a month and a half. Well, the coworker was probably just afraid to get poop onto his clothes. I can't fault him for that. Story 2. My mom and I had a huge joint party for our 15th and 50th birthdays with tons of our friends over at our apartment's clubhouse. I left the main scene to take some of my friends up to my room to show them my pet guinea pig, Squeakers. I opened the front door to my apartment with my friends in tow and opened it without knocking because, hey, it was my house. To my surprise, when I walked in, the living room was full of fully undressed old ladies. Now, I knew that my mom had joked about getting her friends together to take calendar girls pictures for her 50th. I did not know that this was the appointed time and place for said photo shoot. But there they were, my mom and her best friends, some of whom were moms of friends, one of whom was my former teacher, were in their birthday suits, carrying around big fake flowers, feather boas, cupcakes, and taking pictures of each other. There was no lingerie in sight. I stood there, dumbstruck for a second when one of the ladies waved at us and called out, "Oh, hi there, girls, come on in." I made a weird panic noise, slammed the door, and sat on my welcome mat paralyzed with a hysterical, uncontrollable laughter fit for like 5 minutes. It's not that I have a problem with various people's undressed moms in my living room, but it was one hell of a surprise. My friends thought it was hilarious for a while and then shut up about it, but all of those ladies apologized to me for that incident for like years. Like, let it go, gals. I don't need to be actively reminded of that moment every time we meet. Story 3. While working in the ER, some patient got an adult toy lost in the bum. Instead of surgery, the ER doctor attempted to remove it. He was an experienced ER doctor, probably 30 plus years in the ER, and has seen and done everything. He'd save the patient from surgery and be able to leave that night. The patient was sedated with pretty powerful sedatives, propofol, and the procedure began. I'm down the hall and I hear screaming, so I briskly jog over to the room and walk in. What I saw was a 70-year-old doctor past elbow deep in some man's bum. It looks like he was a ventriloquist with a 200-pound doll performing a horror show. The man was screaming in a half stupor. He wasn't conscious, but he certainly wasn't unconscious. The doctor was yelling, "More propofol, push it now." The patient ended up going to surgery to get the adult toy removed. Story 4. When my kids were very young, I would bathe them together. One day, I left the room for a minute, and on my way back, I could hear cackling laughter coming from the bathroom. I sneak up to the door and see the older one on all fours pointing his bum to his younger brother, who was behind him with his index finger extended as if he was going to poke his brother right in the bumhole. The older one said, "Go on, touch it." And as the younger one moved his finger closer, the older one passed some gas. They both cackled like mad. They didn't bathe together after that. Those kids just believe that happiness comes from within, so they let out some happiness. Story 5. Before the beginning of my second year of college, my roommate transferred to another university, and housing replaced him with some random transfer. He ended up being a total pain who would play on his Xbox in the room at 3 a.m. while I was trying to sleep, while even talking into his mic, set multiple alarms at 4 a.m. and not get up, etc. After a pretty intense argument at 5 a.m., I spent the week couch surfing. I had several midterms that week and needed my sleep, and began looking for somewhere else to live. Fortunately, there was an empty room in another dorm, and I made the arrangements to change rooms. I spent the night in my new room and walked over to my old dorm the next morning to move out before heading home for fall break. I was nervous about my old roommate causing a scene, especially since my mom was coming down to help me move and take me back home. Instead, I walked in on him standing over my bed with himself over my Arduino kit and differential equations notebook. Story 6. I usually visit my grandfather on Sundays. His wife passed away in 2014, and in 2016, he was diagnosed with cancer. He refused to move closer to the rest of the family so we could keep an eye on him. So, once he started getting worse, we had a nurse visit him 3 times a week to check on him and take care of his medical needs related to his cancer treatment. So, as I was saying, I usually visit him on Sundays. I went to his house as usual. It was like any other day. I spoke with him about an hour before I got there, and I'll remember this day for the rest of my life. I arrived, walked into the living room, and called for my grandpa. No answer. I checked the kitchen. He wasn't there. I checked the backyard, but he wasn't there either. At this point, I'm getting super worried. So I went to his room, I opened the door, and I'm looking at my 84-year-old grandpa doing the dirty with the nurse. That man is my hero. I miss you, Grandpa, 1932 to 2017. Story 7. Not me, but a story from my ex. When I was working at a grocery store, my ex worked in produce, and we had a coworker who was really nice, but something just seemed off about him. Well, one night, my ex was walking back to their back room, and this guy was just standing there, his back facing the wall and his pants down around his ankles. My ex says, hey, buddy, what are you doing? And the guy completely freezes, then he puts a watermelon down to the side. My ex notes that the watermelon has a hole in it. He was violating a watermelon. Oh, please don't tell me he returned that to the bin of those for markdown sales. I am not buying half-off produce ever again. Story 8. When I was a kid, we had a family reunion in Oklahoma for a few days. One night, I got tired of laying awake in my sleeping bag and went to find my cousins. They were crowded around a dead snake as one of the older girls was mid-dissection. There was gore everywhere, considering they had just recently done away with the snake and the muscles were still twitching. She told me she had done this a quote-unquote million times and was practicing for when she became a vet. I just went back inside. Story 9. I have 8 siblings, so I've seen far too many things I wish I'd never seen. The first one that comes to mind is the time I went into the kitchen and my little brother was on all fours, wearing nothing but a pink belt around his midsection and a pair of my mother's shoes face down in the cat's food dish, eating its food. But now he is remarkably average as far as I'm aware. He was so obsessed with being an animal as a small child that I did have some serious concerns. I haven't come across the full-body fursuit in his closet yet, so I'm hopeful he's outgrown it. Story 10. I went to the wrong house party across the street from the one I was invited to. Everyone, 6 to 7 people, was super chill and included me. They and I had no idea I didn't belong. It was actually a lot more genuine than where I went after I figured it out. Story 11. Well, not really walked in on, but kind of. My wife and I found a cat on my birthday. He was junior size, just barely older than a kitten, and pretty malnourished, so we took him home. He wasn't neutered, which is important to note. Anyway, a week or two later, I was in bed sleeping when I woke up to him fidgeting around on the bed. I opened my eyes and he's lying directly next to my face with a chubby licking his kitty goods. Definitely something I'd rather walk in on than wake up to. I know that's common in dogs, but with cats, it's a pretty jarring experience, especially when it's less than 6 inches away. I'd never seen a cat's junk before, and let me tell you, it's horrifying. Not something you want in your face. Well, he's neutered now, and we haven't had any further incidents, by the way, thank God. Oh, come on, give the kitty a break. He was probably just cleaning his junk after using it. On what? This dude has to figure it out. Story 12. So I used to have this roommate whose live-in girlfriend was a real weird girl. She regularly walked around the apartment after showering with a towel on her head and around her waist, but not her chest, so yeah. Anyway, she was a DEFCON 1 Weeb and had a rather sizable collection of anime and manga stuff, like tons of it, that and Poki. One evening, I came home early after getting sick at work and walked in on this girl and my roommate watching an adult film with some girl getting violated by monsters. I then proceeded to vomit again. They stopped watching their stuff in the living room after that, though, so that was nice. Walking in on their anime night turned out to be this dude's personal Weeb detox session. If you've got a chuckle out of these bizarre roommate encounters, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more hilarious walked in on what stories? You won't believe the weird things people can get caught up in. Story 13. While in the military, I walked into my roommate fapping in the middle of the night while he was wearing nothing but his boxers that had hearts on them. Little backstory here. I had just turned 21, so on the weekends, me and my friends would go out to bars, and since we didn't want to drive buzzed, we would just get a hotel room out in town and crash there for the night. My roommate was pretty new to the military, and we had been living together for 6 months at this point. He was an alright guy. We didn't have much in common, so we didn't talk too much. He knew that when I went out on the weekends, it meant that I wasn't coming back to the room until the next day. So the door to our room had a card reader on it like most hotels do nowadays. You swipe your card and it unlocks the door. Except ours was broken. It just simply didn't work, and we put in work requests for it to get fixed constantly, but it still never got fixed. We had to put duct tape over the part of the door frame where the bolt would lock the door, and this prevented it from locking because if it did, we would be locked out of our room all the time. So all you had to do to get into our room was just push the door open. So one Friday night, me and my friends went to a casino not too far away. I didn't tell my roommate where I was going, but he probably assumed I wasn't coming back for the night. Me and my friends decided we didn't want to pay for a hotel room that night, and one guy stepped up and was the DD for the night. I got pretty hammered and lost some money, so we decided to head back to the barracks around 11 p.m. We get to the barracks, I smoke a cigarette outside and walk up to my room. I get to my room and just push the door open. And there's my roommate, complete darkness other than the glow of a laptop screen shining on him, going to town. As soon as I bust through the door, he looks over at me and says, "What are you doing?" To which I respond, "What are you doing?" and walk back out of the room laughing. So now I have to face the awkward situation of going back into my room after just catching my roommate doing what he was doing. I go back downstairs to smoke another cigarette to let him do whatever he's got to do. After about 10 minutes, I go back up to the room and walk inside. He's in bed, lights off, I get a shower, hop in my bed, and we just lay there in an incredibly awkward silence for about 10 minutes. I pick up my phone and play Beat It by Michael Jackson to kill the silence. He says to me, "I hate you." Story 14. When I was a teacher in Japan, I had an empty classroom I used to do my work in. Occasionally, teachers would come in and do some work as well, but for the most part, I was alone there most of the day if I didn't have a class. I walked in one day and a teacher and a student were in there having a heated argument. The teacher was basically screaming, "What is wrong with you?" And the student responded, "Shut up." The teacher then grabbed the student by the back of the head. It was loud and I was pretty shocked. I basically did the Homer Simpson thing, walking backwards into the bushes. I don't even think they saw me. I told a teacher I worked with what happened. The kid was okay. Nothing happened to the teacher. I saw a lot of physical discipline by teachers while working there. I also saw a lot of violence from students towards teachers. It was a pretty wild experience. I lived in a pretty small and rural area. It was also a pretty poor district too. Lots of Yankee students, which is their term for delinquents, so that physical discipline isn't too much at all. I had a good time there, but it got wild from time to time. Lasted 5 years. Story 15. I was staying at home during my break from graduate school when I came home, maybe around 10:30 at night, to my old bedroom. My 15-year-old high school dropout sister is cuddling on my bed watching my television with a midget person with achondroplasia and some other girl wearing a dog collar. The midget was holding the leash. It was like some sort of twisted Hot Topic advertisement. I said, "Some things just can't be unseen," and I walked out. To think of it, my adventures working for the Veterans Administration Hospital had a lot of interesting things that I saw too. I think my favorite was walking in on a veteran in his hospital bed with a model in the middle of the day. Imagine a big group of doctors and medical students in white coats walking in on some grizzly Vietnam vet getting a sloppy. The most memorable was coming at 6:30 in the morning to interview a patient who, I think, was admitted for some liver problems. He's sitting up in bed, kind of staring at the wall. It's dark, but there is some natural daylight, so I don't bother turning on the lights. I notice that there are all sorts of wrappers in the garbage for medical supplies scattered around the table and on the floor. I also remember thinking that he looked somewhat pale. Anyhow, it turns out that he died in the middle of the night, and for whatever reason, he wasn't intubated, moved, or anything. And to this day, I have no idea why he was sitting up. Yes, and then there are some things that just cannot go unheard. And man, that story about the dead dude still sitting up, being dead, just messed me up. Story 16. A UFC fighter is going to town with some random girl in my hotel room in Vegas, and to this day, no one knows how they ended up in my room. So I walked in and the girl I was with wasn't sure what to make of the whole scene. She introduced herself in what I can only imagine was an evolutionary instinct that short-circuited. I let them know there was some beer left in the mini fridge and we left the two alone to continue. After convincing the front desk that I wasn't pulling a YouTube prank, they got me a new room, called my old room, apologized for the confusion, and sent some bellboys to move my stuff. It didn't seem all that odd at the time. I did get a free room, an upgrade, free laundry, and a replacement case of beer. Story 17. Not me, my husband. He used to work nights cleaning carpets in large office buildings. He'd go, usually with one other guy, and they'd work, each cleaning one floor separately at a time. He's usually totally alone in a big, empty building and certainly doesn't knock on closed doors or anything. So he's working along one office after another, opening the door to the next office, and then there's a woman sprawled out on a desk with a guy just giving it to her. It takes him a minute to process what's happening. She sees him and just starts screaming her head off. The guy whips around and starts yelling, but my husband's already got the door shut and is booking it down the hall as fast as he can drag his equipment. His coworker heard the woman screaming from whatever floor he was on and came running. It turns out they were carrying on an affair and worked late after everyone else cleared out. The best part was that my husband had to call security to go and get them and escort them off the premises, because the cleaning company was supposed to ensure only their own employees were there at night. He said the guy was pretty angry, and that's one hell of a walk of shame. It still makes me laugh whenever he tells a story. Story 18. While at university, I was a first aider for a club. Usual nights were handing out plasters to girls for blisters and holding long hair back as people puked into bowls. Pretty easy stuff. As part of each shift, we'd patrol around the club to make sure no one was slumped in a corner. And at this point, a terrified-looking doorman wades through the crowd to take us to the women's bathroom. When men enter the ladies' bathroom, they're supposed to announce that they're going in. So I shout in chorus with the doorman, "Male entering the bathroom," and that's when we hear the weird noises from a stall. The doorman had heard a report of a potential fitter in a stall, a really dangerous situation, and to be fair, it does sound like it too. So we locate the stall. The one to the side, I think it was the left, is open, so I take a look over the stall wall. Two women were going hammer and tongs with each other in there, with one flailing around like a blow-up inflatable advertising man you see at petrol stations. We left it to the doorman, who radioed for a lot of backup. Story 19. I remember that very clearly when I was on the middle school basketball team. We used to come for morning practices around 6 a.m. every day. Everybody used to keep their bags in the changing room in the morning and go to practice. I forgot something and he came back to take it after one game during break, and I was very casually humming to a song as I entered. What I saw was the guy with himself in an empty girl's changing room with a used hand towel. I went, "Oh, God," and he screamed, "No, I wasn't." He clearly was, and covered himself with the same hand towel, and I slammed the door and went back. I went out and complained about it to the coach. Really awkward conversation to explain what I saw, but by the time we got there, he was gone. It turned out he had a crush on a girl from our team who turned him down. It's really creepy to find out, but you just can't unsee some things. Story 20. I got a few. I worked in a luggage store in college. I walked in the back to see a coworker, mid-30s, crazy woman, practicing sales scripts for luggage while staring at a wall 6 to 12 inches away from her face. She then began to give herself pep talks a la Tony Robbins about how the customers needed her to sell them luggage. I backed out unnoticed. I went to visit a friend in college, a prestigious institution. He lived in an apartment with 3 other guys. I went out to my car to get something, and when I came back in, one of his roommates was sitting on the couch, undressed, completely wrapped in saran wrap, watching football with the other guys. When I asked my friend about him later, he said, Mike does what he does. You just learn to ignore him. This guy is now a very successful attorney and is still pretty weird. The last one, I was taking a continuing education class to maintain a license. During a break, I had to use the restroom. I walk in and a guy is talking on his phone while in a stall. Kinda tacky, but whatever. I'm standing at the urinal when the guy tells the other person he's talking to hold on. He then proceeds to grunt very loudly and I hear a big plop. He then goes back to talking like nothing happened. I'm thinking he had the phone on mute, but he had the volume up so I could hear both sides of the conversation. The guy he was talking to just said, "Damn, feel better?" And then they just resumed the conversation. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you will also enjoy what's the strangest thing you've seen inside someone's home. You won't believe how shocking story 2 was. I'll see you in that video.